Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today I am sitting down with a friend of mine, Sha Nen. Welcome, Shay. It's good to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
And so tell us how you got started writing football articles and the like to where you are now, because you've interviewed some great people so far. Dylan Fox. You've interviewed Simon Hill, the legend of Australian football. So how did you get into that, and what made you want to get into football? I'm stealing one of your questions, but you know.
So I first started writing for a smaller page called The Clean Sheet, which a friend of mine called Will Thompson run. And I first started wanting to talk about football because it was a thing I always did. Like I always just talked about football to friends and my girlfriend and all this and that. So I thought, what if I could make it a career talking about football? He was kind enough to let me write for him. And then to get to the point I am today where I've interviewed some outstanding players and people, that makes me want to pinch myself. I guess I just had a lot of perseverance. At first, when I started interviewing people, my first interview was Joey Gibbs, who I was absolutely stoked with it. But there was a few people who didn't want to do an interview with me because they'd never heard of me, understandable. And then eventually, I guess, through my videos and articles, started to get enough of a reputation that I'd interviewed someone and then their mate might have watched it who was also a player or a coach, this and that. And yeah, I guess one thing just leads to another in football. As they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And thankfully, I've known a few good people who have helped me make those connections.
And I've told you about this privately, but I've started to grow my connection tree too. I don't know if I'm further along than you or we're about the same, but over here we've got like Guy TV and etc. That I've connected with. So it's like, do you find it? You like me? Do you find it difficult to grow your connections, or do you just do what I do? Reach out, and hope for the best.
It's really a combination of all three, if I'm honest. There's been a lot of reaching out, obviously, which is what you do. But I do find it difficult at times because I am quite a shy person when I
So
go to
yeah.
a match. When I go to a match and people who might know me just from Twitter or Facebook expect me to be this really confident, high talking person. And then I meet them. I met Vince Regari, who, we've talked on DMs and all that sort of thing. And yeah, I think I was a bit more awkward than what he was expecting. So it's a bit of a combination of all three making those contacts. I find it definitely easier on Facebook because it's easier for me to express myself than in person, if I'm honest.
Mm. And when I say I'm shy, I don't mean overall shy, but I mean like when it comes to, when it comes to being social, I'm a social butterfly. Da 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 da. But when it comes to like reaching out over Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., I tend to get a lot more nervous. So I'm great at like the parties and chatting and mingling, but I'm not great at the you know growing the connections or the tree.
Yeah, I always say to people, one of the hardest things is to actually put yourself out there and allow yourself to be vulnerable. So anyone who sort of does this sort of thing like what you're doing and is putting themselves out there, I have a lot of respect for because it's easy for people to sit there and say, I don't like your article or your content could use work, but to actually be brave enough to take that step to put yourself out there is absolutely admirable in my eyes.
Thank you. And for someone, I mean, you're um, considerably more able-bodied than me. So for someone in a wheelchair, the stigma is even harder. So I got that to deal with as well. I mean, I haven't received any bad comments, thankfully, yet. But the stigma is a lot more prominent than it would be for someone like you interviewing Simon, or interviewing Jason, or whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
No, enough about a personal life. Let's move on to some football-y type topics. So, we recently had the January transfer window overseas and locally. Big signings everywhere. One of the miracle stories of that window was Christian Eriksen coming to Bradford. Your opinions on that, and especially after what's gone on in Italy and with the heart attack, cardiac arrest, whatever you want to refer to it as. I think it's just incredible, and for him to choose a smaller club like Bradford, excuse me, was very surprising, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really one of those fairy tale stories in football, isn't it? You don't really see them too often, but to see what happened to him at the Euros, where it was pretty ugly scenes. He's on the ground, he's got people doing chest compression, and there was talk of him, maybe not surviving, let alone even playing football. So to see those pictures of him in the Brentford kit, having a kick around in a friendly or something, absolutely warms the heart. And I don't know how he will go. I know he's an absolute class player. Like, I don't know how he will physically go. But even Christian Eriksen at 10-15% is better than 90% of the footballers, on earth, in my opinion. He's an absolutely outstanding player, and it's just really good to see him back on the pitch.
Do you think we'll see more situations like that where medical technology will allow players to continue their career for longer, or in turn come back again from an injury or a situation that they may have said in the past 10 years ago, no, never again? So
Yeah, well, I think technology around football, medically wise, is increasing greatly. For example, Harry Souttar, who Australia's best player in my opinion, did his ACL really badly, and even 10, 15 years ago, the surgery for that, the recovery for that, would have been 2-3 times as long. We've seen players like Virgil van Dijk get what would have possibly been a career-ending injury, and he's come back from it fine, let alone all these heart conditions. Chris Naumoff, who played for Sydney FC, unfortunately found out he had a quite significant heart injury, like a heart condition that stopped him from playing when he got a medical in Spain. So I think, regarding the heart, it's always difficult. I wouldn't say it's something that I could see happening too much, a Christian Eriksen type situation, because, it's one of those things, do you weigh up if you want to be a football player or if you kind of want to not have heart attacks? And I guess it's all on the discretion of the doctor. And Christian, in my opinion, was a very unique case to be able to come back from that.
And what do you think about the controversy? If you don't want to talk about it, we can move on. The controversy in Italy that he had to leave. I don't understand why the Serie A don't want to have the new technology in the competition, because it makes them look like they don't want to grow with the times, because there are going to be, even if it's not for another 10 years, there are going to be situations where it's going to be more relevant. They're going to have the heart not defibrillators, but the pacemakers or whatever you want to call them, or other such devices. So to have a policy like that just seems a bit old, or not out with the times.
Yeah, I totally agree with your sentiments there. I think it's a bit strange, and it's really a bad look for Italy in general. The fact that Christian Eriksen was forced to pretty much leave his club because he got this pacemaker, defibrillator thing put in his heart. It's really just a shame, and it left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. But now I guess the benefit from that is we have this, as I said, fairy tale story with him joining Brentford and all that sort of thing. So, some good did come out of it, I suppose.
And now let's move a bit closer to home. So, in Australia, the Phoenix right over here got the feature of Gail Seville, getting him. So he was another great signing compared to Luis Sevilla. So as having two great Mexican talent in the face of a few seasons is very, very good for a small club like ours, because we don't have the funds of other like Sydney FC, Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City. So to get a player of his quality, and we'll talk about the quality of players coming into the league shortly, but to get a player of his quality for a little team like ours is quite outstanding. And having two, within the space of a short time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Gail Sandoval, there's often when players, even, Australian players come to the A-League who've never played in the league before, sometimes it could take them quite a little bit of time to settle into the league. But Gail, pretty much as soon as he's first stepped foot on the pitch as a Wellington Phoenix player, he's been absolutely on fire. And if this is him not at his peak and he reaches his peak, Wellington Phoenix have one very, very good player on their hands, because already he's, I don't want to put down the other Wellington Phoenix players, but already, in my opinion, he's head and shoulders their best player, and he's arguably the best player in the league form-wise at the moment. So it's very exciting from a Wellington Phoenix fans' perspective to see just the heights that Gail Sandoval can reach. And full credit has to go to the scouts at Wellington Phoenix to be able to pick up players like Yuli de Villa and Gail Sandoval and all these good players on such a limited budget who really are able to turn a game around almost single-handedly. So absolutely outstanding pickup for the Phoenix.
You can see the difference already. Like, just in a way, I don't know if he's done it alone, but he's had quite a good part in it. He's taken us from the bottom of the table to, nearly level on top. So to do for one player to have a significant, if not all part in that is just outstanding.
Yeah, exactly. And a good player like that, an absolutely class player, can often raise the players around him. I've seen him already linking up well with a player who's much maligned in the past, in Josh Sotirio. They're already forming a really good connection. He's forming these connections with players like Rufa, David Ball, and he seems tailor-made for the Wellington Phoenix. So overall, I think it could potentially be one of the best signings the league has ever seen.
Now, we talk about the caliber of players growing in the league. So over the past few years, we've had Daniel Sturridge, Diego Castro, to name a few. So do you reckon the quality will just keep growing and growing and growing?
Well, that's what we like to hope as football fans. Like, I am very optimistic with the A-League, but yeah, to be honest, the way the league is compared to a league like the MLS, who are not only growing their academies and producing young players, but they're also bringing in like Lorenzo Insigne, Xherdan Shaqiri, makes me very jealous as an Australian fan. So I hope we can bring in some of these big name players, but I guess I can settle for the fact that lately in Australian and New Zealand football, we're producing some good quality youth players like Connor Metcalf from the Phoenix. Van Hatton's a very good one, Ben Old. So I guess that's where I see the A-League going more in the future. Not so much big players, more so producing good quality youths and having good youth setups and good youth academies to produce these players like Connor Metcalf.
And I think we are heading that way. Like, they are trying to strive for the bigger names more and more.
Yeah, and unfortunately, football's a very much money-orientated game. China's not so much a problem anymore, but unfortunately, Australia, cash-wise, cannot compete with some of these leagues like America, even smaller leagues across Europe, which is a real shame. But there is some good to come out of it with these young players getting more of an opportunity.
Because it looks like that Perth is going to be that next club in Australasia to take that next big step in the signing the bigger names, because they seem to, I don't know where they got it from, but they seem to be starting to have that backing the same as some of the other bigger clubs in the league. So because there was talk of at one stage, Ibrahimovic coming over there to Perth, they never come to anything, but maybe a Mobile or places like that. There were whispers of all these different names coming to Perth, and you never expected a city like Perth to be the talk of the town for those players, even though most of them never came to anything, but except for Daniel Sturridge. But it's quite interesting to know that Perth seemed to be the next big club off the rank.
Yeah, it's always exciting to see those rumours, and hopefully for the Perth fans' case, they've had a unfortunate season or two COVID-wise, so hopefully they can sign some pretty exciting players when they do actually play at home and fill up the stadiums.
And why do you think they are the next big club in Australia? It just seems they come out of nowhere all of a sudden, because it was always Sydney, City, Victory, and now it's like City, Sydney, Victory, Perth.
Well, Tony Page, their owner, has always been quite an ambitious guy, in my opinion. He walked up to David Beckham allegedly and approached him, asking him to play for the Perth Glory a number of seasons ago. So he's got that ambition, and I guess he is just fed up with Perth being seen as a second-class team and wants to invest a bit more money, get a bit more respect to the Perth Glory, because they're a club that was a former NSL club and they were very successful. They always filled out the stadiums and stuff like that. So maybe he's just trying to bring them back to their glory days, and hopefully it works out for him.
No pun intended. Glory days.
Yeah, I didn't even mean that one, but I'll take it.
Do you believe that all the murmuring that he did go and try and talk to a mobile aid, did try and talk to Ibra?
It wouldn't surprise me knowing Tony Sage if he actually approached Immobile or Ibrahimovic, but not to sound too bleak, I can't see any scenario where Ciro Immobile, who I think is only still 31 or 32, would ever consider leaving Lazio for Perth Glory. I mean, he's still in the Italian national team and all that sort of thing, but Tony Sage is a very ambitious guy, so he's the type of guy who absolutely would go up to someone like Immobile and potentially, ask him to play for his club.
But we haven't seen the Australian League hasn't stopped the big names that are still internationals. That hasn't actually not deprived them, but stopped them from wanting to come to Australia, because the name forgets me, but that Austrian guy that played for Sydney for a while. Yeah, he was still playing for Austria, quite regularly. So it doesn't deter. It seems to deter them.
Yeah, and Australia is really one of those places where a lot of players across Europe always seem to say in a comment, probably a throwaway comment, that, oh, I'd love to play in Australia one day. I'd love to settle down and enjoy the beaches and all that sort of thing. And that's how Thomas Broich, one of the greatest players in the A-League, actually come here. He was on a holiday, got a couple of offers from Adelaide and Brisbane, and the rest is history. So if we as a country, as a league, can really sell that whole, the dream of Australia being this lovely, iconic country, not so much football standards, but also lifestyle, I think we'll have a lot more luck bringing in these big name European players.
So in saying that, like, this could, in turn mean that we could, if we say, oh, if you come to Australia, you can still play for Italy or Sweden or England or whatever. If we can do that, then that might encourage these players like Immobile, etc., to come over, because they will still be able to leave and play for their international side in the windows. So that wouldn't rule that out of the question.
Yeah, hopefully. Unfortunately, with Australia, we're quite a unique continent. We're right down the bottom of the earth. We're away from everything. We're in a completely different time zone. So I know players in the past who have played for these national teams in Europe. For example, Besart Berisha with the Albanian team. He pretty much said, it's too difficult to go back and forth from Australia to go to Europe to play a game, get accustomed to the time zones, the jet lag, come back. So unfortunately, I think that'll be a bit of a hindrance, but hopefully if the league increases in popularity and reputation, players will not mind that so much.
Now, I don't know if you heard this before you hopped on with me, because it's still a little early where you are, but there's rumours going around this morning as we record this. So fair warning to anyone who might be watching it a bit later down the line. But Crystal Palace and Man United might be on their way back to Australia. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I heard those rumours, I think, yesterday, and I think it's always brilliant when these Premier League clubs come to Australia. Even if it's just a friendly with an A-League club, even if it's just, them sending their second string 11, because, we have a lot of people in Australia in particular. I'm not so much sure about New Zealand, that only follow the Premier League, that only follow these European leagues. So, a club like Manchester United with a big support coming down here. I know when I was a kid, half the school had Manchester United jerseys with like Ryan Giggs on them. So a club like that coming to Australia is good for people who love football, in my opinion. They'll probably sell out the Sydney Football Stadium or MCG or wherever they play, and hopefully it'll get a few people thinking, I love football. I forgot how much I love going to a football match and then actually want to go to an A-League match. Perhaps that's
Yeah.
me being a bit too optimistic, though.
And I mean, like we've seen in the past, a great example is former Phoenix captain Taylor. This is, for some players, this has been planting the seeds for them coming to Australia when they have come over here for their pre-season tour. So, like, we saw Newcastle come over unfortunately, after that terrible tragedy several years ago with the airplane. But then 18 months later, maybe a bit longer, maybe 24, around that, we see Taylor signed for the Phoenix. So doing these pre-season tours is actually, it seems that it's inspiring the next group of big signing to come over to this country a bit more.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there. I think if a player comes over to Australia or New Zealand and they realize how beautiful the country is, how nice the people are, when it comes to a point where they're maybe winding down their career or looking for a new challenge, they might just remember, oh yeah, I had a really lovely time in New Zealand and I would like to play there.
So maybe, who knows, this might be the trigger for Ronaldo to finally come to Australia.
Well, apparently Ronaldo has grandparents who live in Perth or lived in Perth or something like that. So, but on your comment about Perth Glory earlier, who knows, maybe in some future reality, Ronaldo could possibly join Perth Glory in a really optimistic outlook.
Oh no. I can see Tony doing it now, like July. Cristiano, can you come to open the firm?
Ugh. I wonder how Cristiano Ronaldo will go playing in front of the shed. I think he might enjoy it.
They might need a bigger stadium if they get Ronaldo.
Absolutely. Although I'm personally a big fan of these smaller, like 15, 25,000 seater grounds when they're full to the brim. I think the atmosphere is much better, in my opinion, than one of these 100,000 stadiums. So, it might be if in the very small chance Ronaldo does come to Perth Glory or the A League, it might be good to see some of these stadiums like the Mariners Stadium absolutely full to the brim, full of fans.
Now, as we slowly wrap up here, so we've had only a couple of big A-League rumours over the past few months. So we had Aubameyang reportedly in talks with Australian officials before he ended up on a free with Barcelona. And so how, in your opinion, how legit was that? Because there was other reporters in Australia saying yes, he's been talking to Sydney and Melbourne, and then there was other reporters saying no, we never did. There was, so will we ever know the truth? Did he actually, in your opinion, or do you have any knowledge that he did speak to officials in Australia?
That was a really funny scenario, that one. It got Twitter in a frenzy, actually. And the guy who actually posted the tweet come out about a day or two later and said, "Look, guys, I made this up." And I don't know if I think he said that he was doing it as a joke or some sort of
I
test.
didn't see that, so I apologize for that.
But I don't know how true his, response to that was. I don't know if he was just trying to get himself a few more clicks, a few more retweets, and come up with this fake rumor and got caught out, or if he was actually intending to do it as this joke all along. But I guess it goes to show really how quickly a small rumor can spread from, someone making a comment, then someone else tells, "Hey, did you hear this and this and this?" Then all of a sudden, this thing that might have a grain of truth or no truth at all can really spiral into the point where like media outlets are actually reporting on them and this and that. So I guess my advice to anyone in the media who sees stuff like this or hears a rumor, I often get people sending me rumors via DM, is to make sure you got a source, a good source, and make sure you got two.
Yeah.
Double check it, triple check it, or else you'll end up with egg on your face. Unfortunately, that's happened to me once or twice, but you learn from these things as a journalist.
Do you think there could be a case where he was sort of a victim, and he said he did hear it somewhere, and he said, "Oh, I'll just put this out," but then it didn't come to much? Could that be a scenario as well?
Aubameyang, yeah, I think people forget how much reach some of their posts can get and that a player can actually see it. I know not just with transfer rumors, with people saying negative stuff or like this or that about a player or coming up with a false rumor. Players do check social medias. Players do have people messaging them and stuff. So if someone's put out a post, saying that Aubameyang is going to Sydney and this and that, and it's getting that much attention, there's a good chance that someone would have shown him that and that he would have seen it. But, fortunately for himself, the guy who originally posted it pretty much said this is not true. He backtracked straight away, so he didn't have to have the chance to do anything like that.
But in saying that, and in reality, we are never going to know whether these types of players are talking to people in Australia because it would never get out anyway. So he might have, said, I was wrong, but there could have been a slight chance that it could have
Yeah,
happened and we might never know.
there's
You know,
always
that
a chance.
there's that scenario too.
There's always a chance, and oftentimes, as Australian football fans, we might just see something like this and think, there's no truth in this. I remember when Daniel Sturridge was first linked to the Perth Glory, I got a few people messaging me saying that Tony Sage was pretty much bragging about signing a former Premier League player who played for Chelsea, who played for Liverpool and was a free agent. So I went into the Slack group chat for my Kick 360 and I talked to a bunch of journos there and I said, okay, who's a Premier League player who's a free agent who played for Chelsea and Liverpool? The only one we could find was Sturridge. We had the mail on this early, but all of us pretty much said, nah, it's not going to be Sturridge. There's no way it's going to be Daniel Sturridge, even though he fits the bill, even though that Tony Sage has revealed transfers in the past like this. So I personally, and I think all of us journos in that little circle, missed out on a really big scoop because we kind of had a bit of pessimistic outlook about, Daniel Sturridge even coming to Australia, a player of that caliber. So I think that's the real downfall with following a league like the A League. When you do get these stories like a Del Piero, a Sturridge, a David Villa coming to the league, often your first thought is, this can't be true, surely.
It was a bit like another example of Wilfred Boney. You know, it was very, very close for a while, but then it just went down like a lead balloon.
Yeah, exactly. I completely forgot about that Wilfred Boney thing. I feel like that rumor pops up every couple of months, and it almost reminds me of the rumors that used to happen every month or two about Ronaldinho coming to the A League, or Wollongong Wolves want Ronaldinho, or some absolutely wild story about Ronaldinho.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's interesting.
But I don't usually do this, but as we wrap up, do you have any questions for me? Like, do you have any quick fire interview questions for me? Since we're just doing this as a bit of people might enjoy this, or they might see it as a bit of a fun one, rather than usually my serious interviews.
Absolutely. Well, if you've seen my interviews, you said that you stole a question from me, so I'll ask that question for you. Where did your love and passion for football first begin?
So I so I got into football due to a um teacher's aide that I had at the school that I graduated in 2019, and he was a big Arsenal fan. And then the janitor or the caretaker was a Man United fan, and he was from the UK. Now, um, their teams were Arsenal and Man United, and I was 12 or 13 at the time, and um, I never really heard of Premier League or the Phoenix at that stage. I'd watch the old game and what have you, and they encouraged me. Oh, because I had a good relationship with the dad, because there was a long period of time where I didn't have any other verbal children at the school, because the school was all about people with complex conditions and so on and so forth. So I I unintentionally built quite a bond with a few of the staff in the first few years. And then we had another guy that liked Liverpool. So over time, they encouraged me to get into football and pick a team. And I ended up picking West Ham United because of Wyndham Reed. And I've just run with that ball ever since. And I continued to follow West Ham and I continued to follow the Phoenix, got into the Phoenix, eventually got into it so much that I went to a couple of games, and through that I decided, because originally I wanted to be in the education industry, but for reasons which I don't want to discuss, that didn't work out. And some of that was due to my disability. And I've decided within the last little while, and especially with COVID sitting down, having a lot of time to think what I wanted to do instead, I've always loved podcasting and stuff like that. So I decided to give the freelance journalism thing another crack, because I've been and gone from it a couple of times. So I decided to give it a real crack this time. Yeah, so that's how I got into football.
Now, I'm someone who does interviews face to face like this via Zoom, same as you do. And when you first start doing interviews, people don't realize how actually, nerve-wracking, nerve-inducing it is to sit down face to face with someone virtually, ask them questions, and try and make it entertaining. I can see from my first video how much I've grown as an interviewer and how much more natural I've gotten. So I guess my question is to you, since you started doing your interviews, what levels of improvement have you seen in yourself?
Well, I still get nervous every time. I'm trying my best not to, cut in as much. That's been a really hard skill to learn, even because I have physical, mental as well as physical disabilities. I can't do the whole social cues thing sometimes. So this has allowed me to really think in and really learn hard about, the social cues and the, sort of thing. So I've had to, this helped me to learn to, I guess, learn the right time to button and the right, well, not button, but right time to move on to the next question. Sometimes, as you will see on the video, sometimes I'm still a bit rusty, but I think I'm slowly getting better, and I think as time goes on, I'll get better and better. But that's my main struggle, the learning to figure out when they're finished and go on to the next one, because some people think some people are going to stop, and then they stop for a couple of seconds, you start to talk, and then they carry on again. So it's like, that's what I struggle with the most, and that's what I think I'll continue to struggle with for the next wee while.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I think I've done about 45 videos and a couple of interviews over the phone for articles and stuff like that. And I still get those scenarios where someone's talking and they'll stop and then they'll think. But when they stop and think for 2 or 3 seconds, I go to ask the question. So I don't think it's something that any journalist or any, person who asks questions will ever fully not be able to do, because it really depends on the other person, and it's quite hard unless you know them to figure out their, speaking patterns and what they like to do. So
And unfortunately, like for me, I I had when I first started this at the beginning of the 2021 to the second year of COVID, because I took the first year of COVID to decide what I wanted to do. And to start with, I had a lot of scenarios where I would not physically but email, knock on doors, and that sort of reference, where I would knock on the doors and they would say, "Oh, sorry, we can't." Even in daily life, trying to find a social group to go to. Oh, sorry, we can't cater for you because of your needs and stuff like that. So, because I had a lot of that with personal life, I also took that into my professional life when I started knocking on doors for opportunities to get into the industry. I I not continued knocking, and had the same sort of response. Oh no, you're not, you're not what we're looking for, you're not what we're looking for, etc., etc. And then how I finally got my break was we have I don't know how familiar you are with New Zealand cable television, but we have a thing called Guy NZ over here, and my decoder or my box was having issues because we have physical boxes over here. Don't know about over where you are, but anyway, my box was malfunctioning, and I needed a new one or whatever. It wasn't working right anymore. Needed a replacement, and I couldn't use a phone. So, my family, my mother works a lot, who I live with, and she was working, and she told me to start the process while she was at work. And I said, oh, okay. I couldn't use the phone, so I decided to try finding an email instead, because their online support happened to be down that day. But they said, oh, the email's working, please find our email. But they didn't have the email on the website either. Anyway, long story short, I accidentally clicked on the media email by mistake. And I sent the message, hi, this is broken. I would like a technician, blah, blah, blah. And the lady emailed me back and said, you've contacted the media department. And I sort of said, oh boy. And she said, so she could. So I told her, I'm so sorry, I'm so embarrassed. And to break the ice, she didn't have to, but I'm so glad she did. But to break the ice, she responded and said, do you have any interest in media? And I don't know if she had, this telepathic feeling or what it was, but, there was some divine intervention that made her, I guess, want to ask that question. And I told her, what my plans were, that my ailments and etc., etc. And I'm sorry this is a long story, but that was really how it happened. I had the long, I told her the story. She she was delighted. She said we encourage they're trying to help freelance journalists, and the rest is history. Now I'm in, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, I'm in regular contact with her right at the moment, and that's how I get all my opportunities and so on and so forth. And I've got a few bigger ones coming up, which I can't talk about here right now, but things are slowly looking up. So
I think, sorry. I think one thing people on the outside don't realize about this particular industry is it starts off with a lot of rejection and a lot of putting yourself out there and perhaps getting knocked back. But all it takes is one little piece of luck to kind of, get that snowball rolling and get you more contacts. With me, it was a similar sort of story. I actually, got in contact with this lady called Lauren who worked at Melbourne City. I bought a jersey from a charity auction and we talked and she was lovely. Turns out by luck she was the partner of the goalkeeping coach at Melbourne City, Neil Young, who, obviously trained up players like Tommy Glover. And I did a lot of interviews when I first started via the phone, via email, because I wasn't, brave enough to put my face out there, brave enough to do a video interview. And her being husbands with Neil, being, close with Tommy, I reached out to her and said, I'd like to do video interviews. Is there any chance that we could do something with Neil or Tommy? And that was perfect for me because it was people who were more laid back, more willing to accept that I was nervous. And, as you said, the rest is history. All it takes is one person to get that snowball running. But I think more people need to realize from the outside, if you want to do this industry, it's going to start off with a lot of rejections, but that's okay.
So, just to clarify, you're saying that yours was a bit of a mistake too.
Yeah, I guess life's full of happy little accidents like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My final question for you, a bit more of a positive one. So, for me, my dreams when I first started this, I had two dreams I wanted to do. I wanted to do media with the Socceroos, which I'm luckily enough, I've got to achieve that dream. And I wanted to work at a World Cup. Now, I haven't got that dream yet, but hopefully I should be able to get it one day. What are your dreams? What are your goals doing this sort of industry?
So, my dream is to have fun, but at the same time, and do maybe the occasional interview with a bit of a kick around with a friend, but also continue to have those serious interviews as well, and just see what doors and what countries I can get into, whether that's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever that may be, providing that I stay healthy with my ailments and doing it in between the different surgeries I had to go through with my ailments. Just do the best I can within my limitations and surroundings where I might be living in the future. If I am lucky enough to start a family, move into a facility, whatever that might be. Yeah. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on as your guest today. And thank you so much for allowing me to answer your questions and even ask you some questions of my own at the end.
All right. So, for my video, I'll say goodbye to the viewers, and I'll get you to stay with me for one more second there. Okay. So to the viewers, I'll say like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.